Hi, everyone. My name's Kayla June. I'm founder of Somatic Groundwork, and I'm excited to have you here in this practice with me today. The kind of focal point of our practice today is going to be deep volume. And I've been writing about the deep volume for maybe a year and a half or so, and I've certainly been exploring the kind of sensory feedback and our living architecture through this, fascial web for many decades. And really, that's the kind of primary entry that we use in somatic groundwork. Now, there's lots of different channels of awareness. So, in terms of our grounding resources and other kinds of ways we might tune in to our body, there's more than fascia. And yet, because there's 200 million or something sensory receptors embedded within our fascial matrix, when we start tuning into our movement and begin moving with awareness, fascia is speaking to us. So this past week, I did some writing, and I'll go ahead and just share those words with you right now. This is in regards to myofascial volumes. These volumes are experiential in nature. The fascial architecture is one continuous fabric. Through somatic movement exploration, these four volumes are like organizational landscapes within the territory of our global fascial body. Today, I'm going to be really exploring with you deep volume, but I'm also naming lateral volume, deep arm volume, and deep leg volume. The volumes include muscle parts, organs, vessels, nerves, bones. What more? There are an infinite number of these volumes. Naming these four volumes is to offer a simple yet undefined way for entering our living architecture. The myofascial volumes are explored through shape-shifting practices and support improved tissue gliding, hydration, nervous system harmony, and movement ease for our body as a whole. Those of you that are interested in fascia like I am know that there are no separations in this ubiquitous, continuous fabric. There are no layers or planes separate from any other layer or plane. It is the thing that teaches us about polarity because fascia at once is what connects every single thing to every other thing and also disconnects or separates everything from every other thing. So, in practicing today, in terms of the benefit of focusing on the deep volume, when we come in and land and explore the kind of the sequencing and the force transmission through this central aspect of us, sensing into our deepest inner container, our midline, our inner pelvic bowl, our viscera, the spaces between the gut and the heart and the lungs, and our throat and jaw and skull. When we come into this particular landscape within the territory, what I hope you'll find is when you come out of the practice that there is going to be a global effect through the whole of you. So I'll look forward to hearing about that in the comments. It's a dynamic process, somatic groundwork. So this process, this practice, we are co-creating and it's unfolding through our experience of the practice. All right, enough language. Please come to the floor with me. So I'm beginning here in what's called constructive rest position. And constructive rest position is standing feet on the ground, arms at an easy distance from your body to the side, really allowing your hands to land where they do. Palms might be up, palms might be more towards the floor. And I like to check in here and see how the relationship of parts are. So I like to start with feet. So I'm sensing into the contact of the soles of the feet to the floor, noticing the right and the left. Making any adjustments that you need if you want to find different agreements between the right and the left side, for example. Same kind of thing then up in the pelvis. So sacrum, lower spine, I'm just doing a little bit of moving here. Okay, making a conscious choice about where to start here in practice. Ribs, shoulder girdle, you might rock back and forth a few times. Reach your arms up. Get a sense of your shoulder blades, maybe allowing the arms then to fall out to the floor from there. And then finally, this balancing part of the skull. So where are you making contact to the floor with your skull? And choosing where you'd like your head to land. I'm also beginning with my eyes open and doing some orienting with my eyes. So really choosing a quality of my eyes, which is more of a gaze. So a gaze is very attentive to the details in the space, but not attaching or really kind of zeroing in on any one thing. So as I'm looking up to the ceiling, I'm kind of really digging the texture on the ceiling, the way the shadows and light are casting. And you might let your eyes wander a little bit, rolling side to side, or eyes moving kind of down, noticing where the ceiling meets the walls. Color, texture, shape. And when you feel complete with that practice, when you bring your head back to its centering place, ask your body now if eyes would like to continue to stay open and aware of your environment, or if eyes would like to close and open the 3,000 eyes within you. And next, noticing your body breathing you. Simply by coming into the floor and doing this short practice so far, there's already been a change in my breathing quality. And so seeing what it's like to witness yourself breathing, so not changing anything, seeing if you can kind of come out of your judging mind, allowing your breathing to be what it is and following it. So using your mind as a tool to observe your breath and to research what's happening inside of you as you breathe. What does that mean? Well, one thing that you might follow is how the shapes within you change as you breathe in. There's an expansion, so a changing of shaping as your body widens in multiple directions. And then as you exhale, there's a returning towards center, perhaps a softening down to the ground, a deeper connection with the support of the floor. So this is really the heart of our deep volume, right? This is really the center of us, this breath expression, which gives us life, which connects our inner and outer landscapes. And simply through this practice of grounding, bringing attention, mindful curiosity to your breathing, here we find a primary self-regulation tool where we can work intimately with both our nervous system and our fascial matrix, right here in this presence. And so we enter a process of yielding. Connection with our eyes, connection with the floor, connection with our body breathing itself. Investigating our relationship in our space, inner space, outer space. And now bringing your attention to all of the places where you are contacting the floor. So returning to feet, pelvis, fleshy areas of your torso, like I'm really feeling my back body right now. And my viscera overall feels like it's settled down towards the floor. Skull, shoulders, down your arms, for me, knuckles of hands. And as if you were laying on the beach, how might you allow yourself to imprint your shape? Allow your shape to drop down and into the sand. Or allowing the sand to rise up and wrap around you. Knowing that at any point you can return here, eyes open, eyes closed. If at any point in the practice you become confused or you start to feel disoriented, you're not sure what's going on, come back to this place. This is where we begin, and this is where we continually return to this presence of being, our home, intimacy with this now. And allowing knees to drop to one side, I'm going to take my knees to the left and then return back to center. So some kind of easeful movement or effortless movement, if you will. What is it like to allow your knees to drop to the side? Gravity catches them, and then through your center body, returning the knees back to where they started. And as your knees drop side to side, instead of them moving in one piece, like both legs at the same time, can you allow each leg to have its own rhythm? So as I drop to the right, it's right side, left side, pelvis. And then coming back, pelvis, left, right. So we're really differentiating these parts. They work together, but each part really has its own rhythm. And as you're doing this movement, are you able to continue to still find this yielding, the expansion breathing that you were tracking? If at any point you start to notice that there's rigidity or stiffness that kind of creeps into any area of your body, that's a good time to pause, take a moment to reset, and begin moving again. So we want to keep this layer of support and spacious breath going while we add in other parts. And then out of this knee drop, letting the knees stay to one side. So I'm keeping my knees now to the left. And then I'm going to draw my right arm up to a high Y position. So make agreements for your own self and see what works for you here. Now, finding the place where your top foot, so for me, that's my right foot, is in contact with the floor. And for me, it's my inner right foot. So it's big toe, and I can track a pathway down to my heel. And if you push into the floor through that contact point, you might move to your full sole. Can you start to track what changes in your body? So we're going to start kind of watching what is force transmission. So push force moving through us. So as I begin to push into the floor, or you might think of pressing the floor away, I'm going to follow the movement through the knee and through the front of my hip. Now, depending how much availability you have, you might notice that your spine also moves. But let's take the force up to the hip and then rolling point of contact across the back body. So this is really finding connection through your back body along the floor like a bag of sand until you're back into that knee drop. So pushing, following that through. So I'm following that force transfer, and I'm not on the outside, so I'm not staying superficial, really seeing how that force is moving through the webs of me. So right now I'm exploring how that then moves through pelvic floor and kind of the inner canyons of my pelvis. starting to move into the deep viscera, and then rolling point of contact back. So we're moving slowly here, giving ourselves enough time to really ask these questions. And if you don't really know what's going on, that's okay. This is non-verbal, really, information that's coming through us. And as you move through this, trust that this information is moving to the brain. And if you stay with the curiosity, there will be shifts in your consciousness in the practice. So pushing through the foot, knee, hip area. I'm going to allow it to go a little further now, up more towards my rib cage. And so now I'm feeling it above the belly button, contacting the underside of what I would imagine to be the diaphragm. And for me, this is where this webbing really becomes a little more sticky as I start to allow this to move through all of the organs that are within our abdominal spaces. I'm also now getting a little stretch sensation along the shoulder. So my hand and arm is really still yielded, but with this kind of force transfer, there's a natural rotation that's occurring. But so take it, as far as you want. So here's really what's happening here. One kind of repetition at a time, following that force transfer, taking a little bit more through you before you pause and go, hey, what is happening? Finding yielding and support with the floor, feeling these kind of tension pathways moving through you, noticing where you feel space, noticing where you feel sticky. Now, you might notice also some muscle parts working to help support you, and that makes sense. For example, now I'm feeling, kind of around the posterior muscle parts like hamstrings and glutes. I'm feeling that activation. There's going to be some muscle part work happening here. As much as possible, we're going to kind of keep trying to take our focus anyway into the tensional network that moves around and through the muscle and everything else. Push. Now, as I'm starting to go a little bit higher, I'm going to start directing some reach pathways. So we're pushing through the foot, but now I'm going to intend to take that through a reach. And my first reach is going to be through my sternum. And this really starts to change everything in terms of my shaping. So there's much more extension here. This changes the position of my head. My eyes are open. My eyes are back behind me a little bit now. My arm is going to start to be part of this pattern. And then I'm going to use my arm, actually. I'm going to reach the opposite direction. And I'm going to allow that to be the thread that then sequences me back to where I started. Now, if this is happening a little bit differently for you, that's okay. And really, my intention is to be enough of a guide through words and through some pointers that you can find a process of intimacy with you through this deep volume. So allow this to unfold in whatever way is present for you. You can't do this wrong. Right now, if you do meet a place that's very painful or feels tender, my recommendation is to not move any further than to go right up to the edge of it and then move out of it. So you might contact it, but then move away from it. Make agreements. If your arm needs to bend right here and more fold, if you need to bring your arm out of it, if you need to change the relationship of how your knees are to the side, all of those things, those are all in your control. You get to choose. So what can happen here then with this push? Oh, I'm really starting to now feel it in the deepest volume of me. It can take a little while to really enter this place. And I'm reaching it out the sternum, reaching out eyes, and now I'm beginning to reach directly through my fingers. So the tensioning through my arm and upper body is really changing here. I'm continuing to push through my feet, or my one foot especially. My lower body is grounded though, and it is giving a little bit of push. And if you want to, you could continue to take this all the way to what I call a half roll. Rolling point of contact goes along the forehead. Oh, I love that part. And I find myself at a natural end point. And you might like to settle here in a very kind of twisted and spiraled shaping. Now, to come out of this, a little bit of push through the upper arm that you're laying on, okay, so that you're not putting too much compression around the shoulder, so there is support there. A little bit of push into the head, or reach out the arm. Let the arm then arc back behind you. Start to connect down to the pathway of this whole side body. So the foot then is also supporting and slowly unwinding through the sequencing pathway, rolling point of contact. And this time I'm going to let myself come all the way back up to the top. And I always find that my body's asking for a little bit of its own movement, like there's impulses for some micro movement after a big expression like that. So see what's present for your body. That could be moving into a completely different, posture. You might roll to your belly, for example. You might come up to another mid-level shape. Again, you can't do this wrong. We're listening and participating here with our living form, with us, with ourselves. All right, so I'm back towards, back in the center. I'm going to take a few breaths to find yielding, and this is a really interesting place when you've kind of practiced one side of your body before you go to the other, to notice what feels different here. So you might do some comparing between your right and your left side. Might notice what different kinds of energetic qualities or vibrations or even words, can start to come up, poetry from your body. How does this nonverbal sense process through your interpretation or your meaning of it? And that's really a whole other conversation, but something I want to point out right here. In somatic groundwork, we're looking at really creating a bigger gap between this raw sensory feedback that comes through us and then our perception of that sensory feedback. So our feelings and thoughts, narrative, story, meaning making, all of that kind of stuff. So how can we put a kind of a space between those two things? And I find that that's a really interesting investigative, there's a really interesting, and I find that that's a very good investigative tool for getting to know about ourselves. Okay, so I'm taking my knees now to the other side, and I'm going to draw my left arm up, so my knees are to the right, left arm up. Move through this side, maybe with a little bit more flow, since there was quite a bit of description of what we're doing in this practice on the other side of our body. So pushing the floor away, and moves through the knee and front of the thigh. And I can feel right now how this is very superficial in this first push, meaning it's really kind of on the outside. I can feel the tensioning on the outside of me, more in the muscle parts. But I know that as I continue to explore this, that I can bring in more sensation to the interwebs. Push, knee, I'm now into the hip. And yeah, I'm starting to feel the entrance now more into those inner canyons instead of just on the outside of the tensioning of hip flexors. And I need to do a little adjustment sometimes with that. So this is where micro movements can become super helpful. So we don't need to stay fixed or stuck in this. So I can move my knee around, move my pelvis around. Postural reflexes with your eyes and moving your head, that can make a change in terms of what's going on down then along your spine, and organization of everything that we're really working with here our vestibular system and our tissue architecture, so proprioceptive and interoceptive feedback, and also this tactile feedback that's coming from the ground. And so again, each repetition of push, allowing that to move a little bit further up. So I'm now around the belly button. And in some of these places that are really sticky, which I'm finding some pretty good sticky here today, pausing, and you might take 3 or 4 breaths in that place. And this next push, reaching out the sternum and the eyes and my fingertips. And sometimes when I get into this place, this is where our lateral volume becomes really noticeable. I'm going to drop my knee and create a pathway. I call it Constellation of Sensations, from knee through the whole lateral volume of me. So hip, ribs, up through armpit, shoulders, and out my arm. And I find that that's a very good place of expansion for my body and for most of us, because we don't typically tend to move in a lot of variation through our day unless we intentionally do some movement or exercise to do so. Ooh, rolling point of contact back. And this time I'm going to go into the half roll. Now, when I do a half roll, I like my other arm to be folded in. And this actually gets into an underlying reflex pattern of eye-hand coordination that we really study in our body half movements, but we find it here as well. And it's also going to help you make choices about how to use your shoulder and what kind of support you need to keep out of, again, too much compression in the shoulder. I'm going all the way into my half roll, and I'm finding that my range of motion is less on this side than the other. So I'm noticing that. And I'm also going to work with my body and not force it, so I find my natural end range. And a push through my arm and shoulder, rolling point of contact along my skull, reaching out my arm. And I'm finding this tensioning between the reach out my arm. There's also a reach out my knee. So you can find these different relationships between push and reach that can then help you explore the in-between, the spaces in between. Taking my arm back behind me and then rolling point of contact from my down arm, across my back, rib cage, across my pelvis, sacrum, and I'm finding myself coming back to center. And again, these natural impulses that may come through your body. And at any point, you might have a pandiculation. You might have already had a pandiculation, which is the spontaneous urge to squeeze and expand and stretch and stiffen, kind of all at the same time. And when pandiculations arise, my recommendation is to indulge, slow it down, really track what's happening in your body and come out of it slowly. So there's a peak usually in this kind of body yawning that happens in a pandiculation. Then allow it to dissolve slowly. Okay, so as kind of a finisher for this practice, taking legs long, and I'm going to take my right foot across and pull down that diagonal and sequence through the foot up to my belly. So this is a kind of a soft body roll with a little bit of structure to it. So I'll offer this as a way to begin sequencing through the whole of you, so through the deep volume, and you might find you want to do it slightly different. Or maybe you want to stay with this with me. So foot slides across, big toe touches the floor. It's like somebody's pulling my foot. And again, like pearls, like a string of pearls or beads. Let that thread all the way through me. And then here's a place where I can pause and feel, yeah, through throat. It's subtle, but I can certainly play with that place, explore it, reaching out the crown of the head, eyes are open, pushing through the arms, help supporting me up to prone. And so this is a different position that we've been in for this practice. So taking a moment here to do some perceptual integrating. For me, that's about taking my eyes around my body. And again, orienting with your environment. And then easy roll, like the sandbag, back to your spine. And let that move right into the other side. Foot, you might think about it as a spoking, or again, somebody pulling you, coming to your belly, and then moving back. So perhaps, doing this roll a few times and then seeing what kind of natural organization might occur for you to then come up to mid-level position. And to do that a few times until you can come up to a mid-level position and find yourself feeling kind of acclimated to this place. So in somatic groundwork, when we're doing kind of this deep investigative work on the floor, we're very thoughtful about how we come up back into our full verticality, into our standing body. Again, this work really is bringing forward a lot of information that's nonverbal, but nonetheless, it's moving to our brain, and we want to give a chance for integration and process. As well, often in somatic groundwork, there's this kind of self-chiropractic work that can happen. So this organizing. So we want to take care of that in our structure as we come up to standing. So the next thing then from here, I recommend getting to your feet in some way. And I'm not going to come all the way up to standing, but I am going to talk you through it so that you can finish this practice. And, you might go into a forward fold of some kind, or maybe hands to knees. I always like to roll up through my spine and have my head be the very last thing that then rises to my full verticality after a deep groundwork practice like that. And if you come up to standing and you're a little bit dizzy, that makes sense. That often happens. That's why we're taking our time here. You might want to do some walking around your room, maybe some lightweight bounces on your feet. Maybe there's some natural movement coming through you. But eventually finding stillness in your standing verticality. Eventually also eyes open, if they're not already. Connecting back into your environment again, shape, color, texture. Tuning into your body, breathing itself. And notice how you are. See about doing a check-in now of creating some language. So we want to bring this now into a feedback loop of naming it, naming you, naming your experience. A few words, qualities, how you are, can be simple or complex, so whatever is kind of present for you. Thank you for joining me in this practice of somatic groundwork. I would love to hear from you and how this practice landed for you just now. Make sure to like my channel on YouTube, share this out to other people that you find would benefit, and I look forward to moving again with you soon.